Sam Harris recently gave an interview to Salon in which he made some negative comments about an article written 2 years ago by Murtaza Hussain and then published by Salon itself. He claims that said article unfairly targeted and misrepresented him. I would like to see if Hussein's piece deserves Harris's criticism. Hussain is responding to an essay by Harris where the latter makes some positive comments about Pakistani feminist activist Malala Yousafzai. He views these comments as a hijacking of Malala's efforts by Harris for his own purposes. He writes, "According to Harris, given the requisite beliefs, an entire culture will support such evil. Malala is the best thing to come out of the Muslim world in 1,000 years. She is an extraordinarily brave and eloquent girl who is doing what millions of Muslim men and women are too terrified to do: stand up to the misogyny of traditional Islam." It's worth pausing here to listen to whether Malala thinks she's standing up to her own evil culture and the misogyny of traditional Islam. The Taliban think we are not Muslims, but we are. We believe in God more than they do, and we trust Him to protect us. I'm still following my own culture, Pashtun culture. Islam says that it is not only each child's right to get education, rather it is their duty and responsibility. Whatever one thinks of this, given that these are Malala's beliefs, anyone with a modicum of decency or respect for her would not go ahead and use her suffering as a tool to attack the very things she's fighting to defend. Yet Harris takes up this opportunity with great vigor. By traditional Islam, Harris likely means the interpretation of Islam that in the course of generations has most taken root in the Muslim world. Given this, all I can conclude from the quotes Hussain has shown is that Malala and Harris are not talking about the same thing. Malala's view of Islam teaches the right and duty of each child to be educated, so when she fights for females' rights to receive education, she's upholding the Islamic tenets she believes in. Harris is instead referring to the Islamic view that supports the misogynistic institutions spread in the Muslim world, hence what Malala is standing up to in her quest. Therefore, what Harris means by traditional Islam does not coincide with the things Malala is fighting to defend, and he's not attacking them using her own efforts. Also, even with Hussein's selective quotation, Harris never says that Malala is standing up to her own evil culture. In context, he's using the assassination attempt on Malala's life to exemplify how ideologies can drive otherwise sane and decent people to commit horrible acts. He writes, "Normal men and women can be moved by ideology to waste their lives and the lives of others in extraordinary ways. Some of these belief systems are merely political or otherwise secular in that their aim is to bring about specific changes in this world. But the worst of these doctrines are religious, whether or not they are attached to a mainstream religion, in that they are informed by ideas about otherworldly rewards and punishments, prophecies, magic, and so forth, which are especially conducive to fanaticism and self-sacrifice. Take a moment to consider the actions of the Taliban gunman who shot Malala Yousafzai in the head. How is it that this man came to board a school bus with the intention of murdering a 15-year-old girl? Absent ideology, this could have only been the work of a psychotic or a psychopath. Given the requisite beliefs, however, an entire culture will support such evil." Hussain continues, "For him it doesn't matter whether Malala believed she was defending traditional Islam, because anyone who tries to differentiate Islam from the acts of extremists are part of the tsunami of stupidity and violence breaking simultaneously on 100 shores. The determination that moderate Islam not be blamed for the acts of extremists." Hussein's selective quotation makes it seem like Harris is implying that moderate Islam is to be blamed for extremist acts. Instead, Harris is saying that some of those who claim moderate Islam is not blameworthy for extremist acts conflate that notion with the one that religious beliefs are never the cause of them. He writes, "A tsunami of stupidity and violence is breaking simultaneously on 100 shores, and people like Karen Armstrong, Reza Aslan, Juan Cole, John Esposito, and Glenn Greenwald insist that it's a beautiful day at the beach. Their determination that moderate Islam not be blamed for the acts of extremists causes them to deny that genuine and theologically justifiable religious beliefs can inspire psychologically normal people to commit horrific acts of violence." Hussain continues, besides their own unique brands of extremist myopia, one formed in Ivy League universities, another in the illiterate villages of a war-torn country, what Harris and the Taliban also have in common are that neither considers Malala to be a genuine Muslim. Without even the pretense of substantiating his argument, Harris claims that criminals such as Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab, universally denounced among religious authorities in the Muslim world, have as good a claim as any to being impeccable Muslims. Harris thinks that Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab have as good a claim as any to be impeccable Muslims because for him their interpretations of the Quran are theologically sound. If what Hussain has shown here is all the basis he has for his accusation, then he's just assuming that Harris does not believe Malala also has a theologically justifiable view of Islam. Hussain continues, aside from his flailing attempt to add Malala to the list of brown women in distress rescued by his virtuous blogging, Harris repeats a litany of facile arguments about terrorist violence that appears to evince near absolute ignorance about the subject. According to Harris, although the terrorists who attacked the Boston Marathon and a soldier in Woolwich, England, both claimed to be acting due to military actions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and said that the only reason we did this is because Muslims are dying daily, he alone knows that this is a cheap ploy to distract from their single-minded religious ecstasy. Harris goes forward to claim that since neither of the attackers were Afghan or Iraqi themselves, this is thus proof that their actions were apolitical and rooted solely in religion. How Harris knows this secret truth, a belief that stands in complete contrast to the actual claims of the perpetrators, is never really explained. Again, Hussain misrepresents Harris. The latter never claims or implies that the terrorists mention the Iraq and Afghanistan wars as the reasons behind their actions to distract from their religious motivations. What he's instead saying is that these people's Islamic faith explains why those events angered them. He writes, and yet the only plausible way that Chechens coming of age in America could want to murder innocent people in protest over the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would be for them to accept the Islamic doctrine of jihad. Islam is under attack and it must be defended. Infidels have invaded Muslim lands. These grievances are not political, they are religious. The same obscurantism arose in response to the Woolwich murder, when two jihadists butchered a man on a London sidewalk while shouting, Allahu Akbar. Their actions were repeatedly described as political, and the role of Islam in their thinking was reflexively discounted. Why political? Because one of the murderers spoke of British troops in Afghanistan and Iraq invading our lands and abusing our women. Few seem to wonder how a Londoner of Nigerian descent could feel possessive about Afghan and Iraqi lands and women. There is only one path through the wilderness of bad ideas that reaches such political concerns: Islam. Finally, Hussain writes, for a man who believes that the Iraq War was fought for a great humanitarian purpose, it is obviously impossible to fathom how such an action could result in any form of blowback other than a bouquet of flowers and profound thanks. Here Hussain is not engaging in any explicit distortion, but I have no doubt that readers who aren't familiar with Harris's work will understand from this that he supported the Iraq War. That is not the case. This is what Harris writes on his website. My position on the war in Iraq. I have never written or spoken in support of the war in Iraq. This has not stopped a journalist like Glenn Greenwald from castigating me as a warmonger, which is especially rich given that he supported the war. In fact, in 2005 he appeared less critical of U.S. foreign policy than I am. The truth is, I have never known what to think about this war, apart from the obvious. Prospectively, it seemed like a very dangerous distraction from the ongoing war in Afghanistan. Retrospectively, it was a disaster. The rest of Hussain's article seems to be insubstantial. That will be all. Thank you for watching.